A very good day to all of you. Today we are going to continue the second part of Lesson 8 from Grade 10 Health and Physical Education lesson series. The lesson is on maintaining a healthy body. In this part of the lesson, we are planning to learn about the circulatory system of our body. So let's get started. If we look at the components of the circulatory system, there are two main components as the heart and the blood vessels which run throughout the body. And the main functions of the circulatory system are to transport oxygen, transport nutrients and waste throughout the body. There are two types of circulation performed by the circulatory system. One is called the systemic circulation and the other is the pulmonary circulation. So in systemic circulation, blood flows from the left ventricle, you can see the left ventricle, blood flows from the left ventricle to the organs and body cells. And then blood returns to the right atrium, which is this one over here, after delivering oxygen and nutrients. So I think this figure is a better explanation for the circulations. As you can see, blood flows from the left ventricle to the organs and other body cells, and then blood returns to the right atrium after delivering oxygen and nutrients to the body. And the other circulation is called the pulmonary circulation, which is associated with lungs. Here, blood flows from the right ventricle. This is the right ventricle. The blood flows from the right ventricle to the lungs to receive oxygen. And oxygenated blood, so once it goes to the lungs, it receives oxygen from the air we breathe, and now the blood is oxygenated, and then this oxygenated blood returns to the left atrium of the heart. So to simply put, the systemic circulation and the pulmonary circulation, this is what it is. Now let's look at one of the main components of the circulatory system, which is the heart. So the heart is a muscular organ and it has four chambers: the right atrium, the right ventricle, the left atrium and the left ventricle. There are also heart valves and they perform certain functions. So one of the valves is the tricuspid valve, which is between the right atrium and the right ventricle. And then there's the bicuspid valve, which is over here, also known as the mitral valve. It is between the left atrium and the left ventricle. And then there are semilunar valves over here. These valves are located at the aorta and the pulmonary artery, preventing the backflow when ventricles relax. So when ventricles, right after the ventricles pump their blood through the pulmonary artery or else the aorta, they relax. So there's a pressure drop and the blood might try to backflow. So these semilunar valves are there in the aorta and the pulmonary artery to prevent the backflow of blood. So here we are going to talk about the blood flow in the heart. So in the figures, usually deoxygenated blood or blood which is less in oxygen is indicated using blue color, and oxygenated blood which is rich in oxygen is usually indicated in red color. So deoxygenated blood from the body, now once it has started circulating throughout the body, It has spent all the nutrients, oxygen it has, and now it's coming back to the heart. So the deoxygenated blood from the body, it enters the right atrium, and it enters the right atrium as you can see over here. It enters either through the superior vena cava or the inferior vena cava. If it's from the upper part of the body, it comes through the superior vena cava, and if it comes from the lower part of the body, it comes from the inferior vena cava. And then blood moves. Now blood is in the right atrium and it moves to the right ventricle through the tricuspid valves. Now the function of the valves, both tricuspid and bicuspid, is almost just like the semilunar valves. The whole function is to prevent the backflow of blood from the ventricles to the atrium. So after blood moves to the right ventricle, then it is pumped to the lungs. Now it needs to go to the lungs to get oxygenated. So it is pumped to the lungs via the pulmonary artery. You can see it clearly in this figure as well. Right atrium, it goes to the right ventricle, and then it goes to the lungs through the pulmonary arteries. And then now it gets oxygenated in the lungs, and then the oxygenated blood returns from the lungs through the pulmonary vein. You can see the pulmonary veins over here, and they return to the left atrium of the heart. They go through the bicuspid valves and enter the left ventricle. And blood flows into the left ventricle, and then it is pumped to the body. Now the blood is rich in oxygen, so it can be pumped to the body again, and it's pumped to the body through the aorta. So that is the blood flow in the heart. Alright, let's dive deeper into the circulation process in the heart. So there's atrial contraction. That means the atrium, the right atrium and the left atrium of the heart contracts to push blood into the ventricles. The right atrium contracts. This is a muscular organ as we discussed before. The right atrium contracts and push the deoxygenated blood into the right ventricle, and the left atrium contracts and push oxygenated blood into the left ventricle. So that is known as atrial contraction, the contraction which takes place in the atrium. And there's ventricular contraction which happens in the ventricles. The right ventricle contracts and sends blood to the lungs via the pulmonary artery through the semilunar valve. In the left ventricle, it contracts and sends oxygenated blood to the body via the aorta through semilunar valve. So that's all about atrial contraction and ventricular contraction. And then there's gas exchange in lungs when it comes to pulmonary circulation. In the lungs, carbon dioxide is removed and oxygen is absorbed into the blood. And then this oxygenated blood returns to the left atrium via the pulmonary veins. And then there's systemic circulation. So the aorta branches into smaller arteries and further into arterioles. The aorta branches into smaller arteries and arterioles that supply oxygen and nutrients to all organs. These arterioles further divide into capillaries where the exchange of oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients and waste occurs. So the exchange of all these things happen inside the capillaries. And then the capillaries from the arteries merge with the capillaries in the veins, which collect the deoxygenated blood, and it returns to the right atrium via the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. So that is how the systemic circulation is completed. There's another system associated closely with the circulatory system, and it's known as the lymphatic system. So let's talk about what's meant by tissue fluid. So tissue fluid is formed when substances diffuse from capillaries into the extracellular space. You can see there's extracellular space in between the body cells. So when substances from the capillaries diffuse to the extracellular space, some of this extracellular fluid, there's fluid in the extracellular space, it's called the extracellular fluid. This extracellular fluid enters the veins or the capillaries of the veins, while some of the other is collected by the lymphatic system. So the lymphatic system also has lymphatic vessels, and they are branched further into lymph capillaries. So some of the extracellular fluid enters the vein capillaries, while some of it enters the lymph capillaries. And the ones which enter the lymph capillaries are known as the lymph, and what happens here, the fluid which enters likewise is known as the tissue fluid, the extracellular fluid. And then there are two main functions of the lymphatic system. One is that it transports digested fats, forming a milky substance called the chyle. And the other main function is that it protects against infections through white blood cells in lymph nodes. We have lymph nodes in different parts of our body, and these lymph nodes swell when we are infected, depending on which part. For example, if your throat is infected, your neck lymph nodes might swell. If you have any wounds or infections in your hands, your armpit lymph nodes might swell. So it depends. So what happens in the lymphatic nodes or the lymph nodes is that they help fight infections by attacking and destroying germs, either bacteria or virus, that are carried in through the lymph fluid. So this is the tissue fluid. When it enters the lymph capillaries, we call them as the lymph fluid. So what the lymph nodes do is that they fight against infections by attacking and destroying all the germs that are carried in through the lymph fluid. And it's kind of a filter for the lymph fluid. Next, we'll be talking about some of the diseases related with the circulatory system. And we are going to talk about angina, which means reduced blood supply to the heart, and myocardial infarction, also known as heart attacks, stroke, which can cause paralysis, and also hypertension. Alright, let's start off with angina. Angina means the reduced blood supply to the heart. So there are coronary arteries, the arteries which supply oxygen and energy to heart muscles, just like any other organ which needs oxygen and energy to function. The heart also needs oxygen and energy to function. So it's the coronary arteries which supply blood to the heart muscles. So sometimes plaque buildup can happen inside the walls of the arteries. This plaque is often because of high levels of bad cholesterol, which is LDL cholesterol, and there are also some other substances involved in it. So plaque or fat buildup can occur in the artery inner walls, and this causes them to narrow down their size and also cause some sort of stiffness in the artery walls. They are not flexible anymore. So this reduces the blood flow, and this can reduce the entire blood flow required by the heart muscles to function properly. And this can result in a sharp chest pain, fatigue, and other difficulties in physical activities. So angina is often caused with a sharp chest pain. It's like the main symptom. However, there are other symptoms along with it. So it really means simply means reduced blood supply to the heart. And then there's myocardial infarction, also known as heart attack. So this also happens due to fat deposits or plaque buildup inside coronary arteries. It causes a complete blockage due to blood clots. Now, if I elaborate more on it, if there's plaque buildup already in the artery inner walls, they have narrowed down the size of it. So suppose there's a blood clot out there in blood and it tries to pass through this artery, and it cannot pass through it because it's too narrow for it, and as a result it causes a complete blockage, and this cuts off the oxygen supply because it cannot provide enough blood to the heart muscles. Now the heart muscles aren't getting any oxygen, and this can cause death of heart muscles after a while, and it can lead to serious complications and even death later on. So that's about myocardial infarction, or else heart attack, which is the most common term that we use. And the other one is stroke, or else paralysis. So similar to a heart attack, a blood clot or a plaque buildup can happen in any of the arteries taking blood to the brain. So if it causes some sort of a block of blood flow to the brain, or else it can be even caused by ruptured arteries in the brain, a stroke can happen, and a stroke results in symptoms such as loss of speech and also paralysis on one side of the body. Then there's hypertension, commonly known as high blood pressure. This is caused by thickened arteries. So the arteries have some sort of a resistance build up with their walls, like within their walls, because they have to have some resistance against the blood pressure coming with the blood flow from the heart. But if there's high blood pressure, if the blood pressure in the heart is high, the arteries also build up some resistance against the high blood pressure, and the walls become more thicker, and it reduces the flexibility of the arteries as well. Now this is going to increase the resistance to blood flow overall, and then the heart must work harder to pump blood. This can also lead to kidney failures, brain damage, and even heart damage. So there's an increased risk of stroke, heart attack, and kidney failure for people who are having high blood pressure. So some of the very common ways to prevent high blood pressure is to maintain a healthy BMI and avoid smoking and alcohol, also reducing the salt intake and managing stress. So these things are really important in order to prevent high blood pressure. And then before we wind up the session for today, let's look at some of the steps to prevent diseases related to the circulatory system. So one is engaging in adequate exercise, because when you engage yourself regularly in physical activity, that's going to strengthen the heart, improve blood circulation, and also will help maintain a healthy weight. So activities like jogging, walking, cycling, swimming, these can be done in order to reduce the risk of heart disease. And another thing is maintaining an active lifestyle. So try your best to avoid a sedentary lifestyle. That means if you are sitting for long hours, try your best to avoid it. So simple habits like taking the stairs and walking instead of driving short distances. If it's like a short distance, you can opt for walking rather than driving. And stretching regularly, like if you are being seated for long hours, you can just stand up and stretch. So these can improve heart health. So you are not sitting for long hours. Try to remain active in between. Avoiding smoking is also really important. Nicotine and carbon monoxide in cigarettes, they can damage blood vessels, and then it increases the risk of high blood pressure, heart attack, and stroke. Therefore, quitting smoking significantly lowers the heart disease risk over time. Avoid consuming alcohol. Excessive alcohol can raise blood pressure, cholesterol levels, and increase the risk of heart failure. It also contributes to weight gain and other liver diseases affecting overall health. So avoid consuming alcohol to prevent yourself from getting any circulatory system related diseases. And then getting used to healthy food habits, like limit excessive food intake, and then you can maintain a healthy weight. Avoid too many sweets because high sugar intake may increase the risk of diabetes and obesity. Reduce salt consumption, which can lead to high blood pressure. Also avoid fatty foods, especially trans fats and saturated fats, which can lead to cholesterol buildup in arteries. Also controlling obesity and diabetes. So obesity, like if somebody gets obesity or become obese, it increases the risk of other types of non-communicable diseases like high blood pressure, heart disease, and stroke. Because excess weight is going to put strain on the heart, and that leads to insulin resistance and increasing the likelihood of type 2 diabetes. So diabetes also again damage blood vessels and nerves and make the heart disease more likely. So managing weight, diet, and exercise, all these things can help prevent both obesity and diabetes and reduce the cardiovascular disease risk. So that brings us to the end of the second part of lesson 8. There are some more lessons to come, so subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more. Thank you very much and see you next time.